Hi there. Hello. Welcome back to the Pitch Grid. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is going to be a pretty full recap episode of the past week of NFL and EFL action. As always, really appreciate any listens and views. It means the world that you stick around each and every week to listen to thoughts on these two leagues. Um, Please consider giving us a follow and a like on all our socials and all platforms. That would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, let's start getting into things here. As let's head pitch side first. Let's go under um, the news first, real quick. There is a bit of news concerning Norwich City, actually. Um, Norwich City's under 18s have a new boss. Well, he's the under 18s coach for Arsenal. He joins the Norwich coaching staff, and that is Jack Wilshere. 32-year-old coach who was the under 18s coach at Arsenal. Done very well, very popular among the younger players in the academy at Arsenal. Um, Arsenal's very disappointed that they had to let him go. Um, and it's a huge move for Norwich, who definitely have gained a huge boost to the coaching staff. Just a quick note on that. So it's pretty cool for Norwich. They definitely trying to up their game, as of course they are hoping, as all teams are, to gain the Premiership. So let's start on the pitch side with one of the bigger games of the week, and that was Leeds at Sheffield United. Well, home to Sheffield United. And both teams came into this highly ranked. Sheffield was second in the league. Leeds came in fifth into this match. And it never really felt close. I mean, for a bit there at the beginning, there was it was very tight. Um, Neither team could really pull anything out. But Leeds just slowly grew into the game, and Sheffield United just couldn't do anything about it. The more the game dragged on 0-0, the more the Leeds got chances, the more you thought Leeds was going to break through, and they did. In the 69th minute, Pascal Stroik had an absolute beaut of a goal, who he just slams into the back of the net, and it gives Leeds the 1-0 lead. And after that, Sheffield just never got a chance to really do anything about it. Um, and then eventually, um, the deciding goal came from Mateo Joseph in the 90th minute to make it 2-0. And yeah, there wasn't much added time on, and Leeds held on for all 3 points. And it was a very clinical match. Leeds won the possession battle of 55.1% possession to 44.59 for Sheffield United. Um, Sheffield United, the big stat here, they had no shots on goal. As I've said before, I kind of feel like it's a weird stat, but it really shows how they really didn't threaten goal. They only had 5 shot attempts total to Leeds 13. Leeds only had 4 shots on goal, but they made 2 of them count. Very few yellow cards, only 2 for Sheffield United and 1 for Leeds. Um, Leeds had the majority of the set pieces, 7-3. So yeah, this was a pretty clinical game from Leeds. Not much really that showed Sheffield could compete with them, and yeah, um, this is kind of what we expected. From Leeds at the beginning of the year, they kind of just started really slow, and it just really never they really never showed they could threaten Leeds, and yeah, it wasn't pretty. Um, so let's move on. Um, let's go to the bottom of the table. Cardiff and Plymouth came to this match, both at the bottom of the table. Cardiff was last in the table. They really did not show any fight at the beginning of the season. And then they come into this match, and they absolutely wallywomp Plymouth 5-0. I mean, talk about a shocker. Plymouth, I think, like I said before, the preview, Plymouth had come into this with a little bit of a momentum coming into the international break, and it looked like they would, have, they might be able to really take care of dispatch of Cardiff, and that was not the case. Alex Robertson scored the 16th minute for Cardiff to make it 1-0. Then 8 minutes later, Ruben Caldwell scored the second, and from there, and just Plymouth started showing frustration. Ibrahim Sissoko was sent off in the 41st minute by the Plymouth goal scorer. He was sent off right before half. I want to point this out. Cardiff had 25 shots on goal. Well, 25 shot attempts and 11 on goal. Plymouth only had 6 shot attempts total, and 2 of those went on goal. Yeah, it was that bad, and it was that dominant. Then the last 3 goals came in the 52nd, the 75th, and the 80th minute, just to absolutely humiliate Plymouth. Interestingly enough, though, Cardiff did have the more yellow cards, 3-1, but they dominated corner kicks at 9-1. Plymouth did make 6 saves, but it never was close. Never felt close. And Plymouth have a lot of soul searching to do. I believe Wayne Rooney was banned for this match, because of the whole red card situation. So that that had to hurt. And yeah, that's a completely unacceptable loss for Plymouth, who were trying to climb the table and now are just right back at kind of where do we go from here starting point. So yeah, that was a really weird game. Another weird game, Luton and Watford. Luton come into this game near the relegation zone. Rob Edwards really needing a goal. The key of this game, set pieces. Luton dominated. They're a very physical team in general, anyway, and it showed. They scored 2 of their 3 goals off set pieces, and won 3-0 at Kenilworth Road. And it didn't even feel like Watford had many of the chances in the second half. They seemed like they were going to maybe have something to play for in the first half, because after the 11th minute, when Luton scored to take a 1-0 lead, they had some chances. Watford did. They just couldn't capitalize on them. And then second half, the second goal was scored in the 47th minute, so just 2 minutes after halftime. And it just never looked like Watford could get back into this game fully. And then when the 91st minute goal 3-0 came in, it was pretty much over anyway, but just extra goal differential padding for them, for the Hatters. And it's a huge win for the Hatters now. They kind of escaped the relegation. They get some distance between them and the relegation zone. They are now 3 points out of the relegation zone, and have a +5 better goal differential than Cardiff, who are now at the top of the relegation zone because of results. Yeah, this was kind of embarrassing for Watford in a rivalry game. Watford did have the better the possession, 58.6%, to 41.4 for Luton, but Luton just had the more shots and the more shots on goal. 13-9 in terms of shot attempts and 5 shots on goal compared to 1 for Watford. 11 corner kicks. Like I said, set pieces were the narrative of this game, and it showed. Watford just could not stand up against the Luton corners. Luton definitely had some great set pieces conjured up, and it was evident that they just were the better team of the day. And maybe Luton now kind of take this as a momentum and try to say, hey, we could do this, and maybe climb up the top, climb up the table. That can very easily happen in the championship. Um, Another surprise result, Stoke and Norwich City. This was in Stoke, and Stoke and Norwich come away at a draw of 1 apiece. Norwich came into this game on a heater, having just destroyed Hull. They dominated possession in this game. It was 61.1% possession for them, and they had, I believe, they had the early goal. the 45th minute, and then right before halftime, they had a ton of added time in this first half. 46th minute of the 6 minute of extra time in the first half. Added time, Stoke scored the equalizer, and from then on, it is just absolutely nothing happened. Neither team could get much of a chance. Both had a ton of shot attempts, 14 for Stoke, 12 for Norwich. Stoke did have the advantage of goals on target, shots on goal, 5-4. They had the more corners, 8-7, and yeah, it just kind of a surprise result. Smashing, smashing grab draw for Stoke to get something out of this game, which is good. They needed something out of this game. Um, kind of sliding down the momentum with the new coach after having sacked their former manager Schumacher. So they get a point out of this game. I mean, it keeps them in 16th place, kind of where Stoke traditionally is. Um, but yeah, it was a kind of subpar showing for Norwich, who came into this game very hot, and it kind of shows, yeah, they aren't as good on the road as they are at home, where they still are undefeated. So very, very weird game. Another weird game was Oxford and West Brom. West Brom took a goal lead early in the 29th minute, and they had the game. They looked like they were going to they were dominating this one, really. And then Oxford kind of just in the late stages of the second half kind of swung possession in their favor, and then got on a cheeky corner kick. They scored the equalizer in the 92nd minute, second minute of added time, and they get the point. They get a share the spoils with West Brom in Oxford, where again Oxford are very hard to beat. Uh, it's a 1-1 game, and yeah, I mean both teams had their chances. Both had 3 shots on goal, 14 shot attempts for West Brom, 12 for Oxford. Uh, it is something to say for Oxford, who are just a very plucky team, that they can absolutely snatch defeat, snatch something away from the jaws of defeat, especially at home. It has, yeah, you got to give credit to their coaching staff, who don't let them give in, and obviously their team leaders as well. Very, very clinical game for them, and yeah, it was a yeah very weird game because you felt like West Brom was just gonna waltz away with this at the beginning after the goal, and they just kind of it seemed like they just fell asleep there in the last few minutes, and Oxford just took advantage of that. And West Brom definitely have some questions to ask themselves. They cannot seem to be getting out of their own way. They need to figure that out quick before um, something bizarre happens to them after having been top of the table. They would have been top of the table if they had won this game actually for the day, depending on results. As well, they would have been top of the table at the end of the week. But as it is, they they failed to do that mission. Obviously, another one that was interesting at the bottom of the table results. Couple of them. Preston North End took a 1-0 win from Coventry. Um, both teams were kind of pretty even in the first half. Nothing really to show for it. Preston had a couple of yellow cards, but it was a pretty meh game at the end. And then Coventry just turned on the switch in the second half, and it looked like they were going to be the ones that might score the opening goal. Then all of a sudden, on a cheeky kind of counter slash counter move, they get a corner, and Emil Reese slots in a goal off the corner, off a weird, chaotic kind of set piece. It just lands at his feet, and he slots it home, giving Preston the 1-0 lead. And I mean, Preston in the first half, they had the better of the chances, better of the opportunities. But then the second half, Coventry just kind of turned it on, and they looked desperate. They looked hungry. Um, they wanted it, but in the end, they just couldn't do anything. There was a chance. There was a call for Coventry that they would have equalized, but Haji Wright was called for a handball. Um, if you look at the replay, It's not very clear, at least in my opinion, that he touched it with his hand. You could argue he probably did, but on replay, if you slow it down, it's very hard to tell. And I can't blame the refs. I mean, they talked about it, and it was called off. And ultimately, I know know some Coventry fans would probably say that should have counted. I wouldn't be shocked if it had stood, but the ref decided it didn't, and it dooms them because they're now within goal differential, the relegation zone. They are literally only 5 goals off of the relegation zone. They are tied with Cardiff on points. Um, yeah, it's just another weird bad result for Coventry, who just came into this season full of optimism because they have so much attacking talent. Like literally Ellis Sims, Haji Wright, Brandon Thomas Asante. Those are those are names in the championship that you would think, especially after last season, they can score goals. Um, yeah, they lost Callum O'Hare, but this is this was a game that they should have won if they really wanted to get themselves out of the relegation zone. And now, I'm not saying that Mark Robbins needs to get fired or whatever, but it's getting there because there's something not right at Coventry right now. I don't know if it's they just it's the players, it's how they're just trying to find some cohesion. I don't know what it is. Both teams had a lot of shot attempts. Preston had 18 to Coventry's 12. Preston did have the more shots on target, 3-1. They had more yellows, which gave Coventry a lot of opportunities for set pieces, which last year they were clinical in. This year, not so much. Preston edged the possession game at 50.9% to 49.1%. Yeah, it was just a weird, close, tight game that just by both teams desperate for points, and Preston got those points, and they climbed up 5 spots, I believe, 4 or 5 spots, just by getting a result, and it's huge. And you can tell Paul Heckingbottom is doing something right in Preston because he's getting them to attack. They have much better attacking prowess than they did um, with Rob Lowe as their coach. And yeah, if Preston can keep this up, they could be a very sneaky team than what people thought at the start of the season. Another one at the bottom of the table, Portsmouth beat QPR 2-1. QPR got the early goal at 9 minutes from Karamoko Debele. Very exciting talent there. He got them off to a great start, but then Freddie Potts equalized in the 18th minute, and it kind of stood that way until the second half when Callum Lane got a penalty and slotted home in the 57th minute to make it 2-1, and Portsmouth hung on for the win. And QPR dominated this possession. That's why I say hang on, because QPR assaulted the Portsmouth goal after that, and they just couldn't find anything to go in. They had the more shots on goal. QPR did it 8-3. More shot attempts, 15-11. More Portsmouth had the more corners actually, 5-3. And give credit to the Portsmouth keeper who was absolutely um, he was absolutely memed on after allowing 6 against Stoke before the international break. He made 7 saves in this match. So all credit to him after coming back after a pretty bad game against Stoke, and just to go here and help give his squad the win in what was a very tight game in terms of who's going to be at the bottom of the relegation zone. It turns out QPR is now um, by a point, and so it's a very tight relegation zone now, or drop zone. You got Coventry, Cardiff, and Portsmouth all tied on points. And then you got Millwall and Plymouth right there, ahead of them by 2 and 3 points respectively. Um, Speaking of Millwall, Derby County and Millwall tied at 1 apiece. Um, Jerry Yates got the goal in the opening goal in the 78th minute. And then Millwall equalized pretty quickly 7 minutes later to tie it at 1, and no one else could just seem to find a goal because both of these teams kind of, yeah. Millwall did have a lot of chances. 6 shots on target of their 16 attempts. Um, they just never could find anything to exactly go in until that late equalizer, and then nothing just happened really. And yeah, Millwall Derby. kind of, both play a very similar style of defensive counterattack ball. And yeah, it's Millwall wanted the points to get out of the relegation zone. They got something out of this, so credit to them for getting something out of it. But they really, you know, how the stats show, dominating the possession battle, getting the more corners, getting the more shots off. You would think they would have had the chance to steal all 3 points, but they did not. And as a result, they are still well within the drop zone. They're only ahead by 2 points of um, Coventry, Cardiff, and Portsmouth. So yeah, it's let's head to a couple other games on the Saturday slate. Middlesbrough, Bristol City. Um, this was a weird game. Um, Bristol, they kind of just took this by the scruff of the neck. Borough dominated the possession. They had a ton of shot attempts at 20, but they got 3 yellow cards in the span of the first 10 in the span of 10 minutes. They had a booking at the 3rd, 8th, and 13th minute, and I really think that set them back defensively on what they could do. There was a ton of yellow cards. This Sam Allison had a ton of yellow cards in this game, especially on Middlesbrough, and I think it hampered them defensively because Middlesbrough really liked to play from the back. An individual error cost them in the 27th minute, kind of the story of Middlesbrough sometimes this season, where they just make very weird errors. And yeah, Bristol City took advantage in the 27th minute. They scored a goal, and then the second came at the 47th minute to give them a 2-0 lead, and Borough just had no answers. They had several shots go close, and yeah, they just have been kind of unlucky in their finishing. It's not that they haven't had good attacking play, it's in terms of scoring goals. They had the better of the shots. Bristol barely had more shots on target, 3, and Borough had only 2. And it cost Borough because now they're with back 4 points of the top 6. This would have been a game where they could have actually been top 6 if they won this game at home, where they had been pretty good at home. So this was a very disappointing result. 3 penalty shots were also turned away by the ref, and that's kind of frustrating for Borough fans, I'm sure. One of them probably was a good one not to was a good one to turn away, but the others just felt very. Why did he let them have those penalties? And if he lets them have 2 of them, it's a tie game and Borough gets a point out of it. But that's how football works some days, and it's just Middlesbrough really need to focus as they have a huge game with Sheffield United coming up, and if they can't finish that game might be a bloodbath. I believe that game with Sheffield United is at home. So yeah, it should be a interesting one to say the least. Last one on the Saturday doc was Burnley Sheffield Wednesday. Burnley really just dominated this game. They got a couple of goals early, the 37th and the 50th minute, and never looked back. Sheffield Wednesday had a couple of chances early, and if they convert those, this game probably is way different. Burnley just dominated this game in general. They dominated the possession battle at 62 to 38% in terms of possession, more shots on target, more shot attempts. Um, Sheffield Wednesday did have a lot of corners. That they did beat Burnley in that stat, but otherwise it was just a rough game at home for Sheffield Wednesday. The game they were hoping to win, but they couldn't just get anything really going in terms of their attack. Um, and yeah, Burnley just showed why they are a better team. And yeah, they scored more than 1 goal. So usually, if Burnley score more than 1 goal, they're probably going to win. And finally, on the docket, Sunderland and Hull. Sunderland kind of just it was a weird game for them. Let's be honest. Hull came into this game off a thrashing, and they played tough. They played Sunderland tough. All credit to them. They made it tight. Sunderland couldn't do anything in the first half, really. They had a few shots, but they never seemed to really go on target. They only had 2 go on target the entire game, and the one that counted, got them the win. Wilson Asidor in the 63rd minute slotted home the winner and helped Sunderland stay at the top of the table with 22 points. They got the win. They barely had. They lost the possession battle to Hull. Hull had a ton of shots. They just could not convert them. Kind of similar to the Norwich game. It just seems like Hull has the pieces for an attack. They just never can find that final finisher, kind of like Middlesbrough, which is interesting. So it makes me wonder if Middlesbrough and Hull can both find their finishing boots, if they can both be deadly in the attack, but deadly going up the table later this season. But yeah, Sunderland just kind of really put on their defensive boots this game and showed they can be a team that can win either way. Um, yeah, and Hull just kind of showed why they are kind of mid-table this year. They have the creative juices, they just can't finish, and that's gonna hurt them eventually. Um, so yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how Hull go from here. I believe their next game is a midweek match against Burnley. That's gonna be tough. Um, yeah, whoever if Hull pulls a result out of the game, I will be kind of shocked. But still, that was a tough way to lose for Hull. Sunderland just keep rolling and look really good in the process. And that's our pitch side recap for the week. Let's head to grid side for week 7, where we had some interesting games. Let's start with the Broncos Saints game. This was a pretty easy game to recap, really. Broncos did not really let the Saints get anything going. They had a 13-0 lead before the Saints could even do anything about it. Saints came into this game heavily injured. On the receiving side of the ball, Rashid Shaheed had a meniscus surgery on Thursday before the game. Chris Olave, I believe, was out with a concussion. This game just never ever got going because for the Saints in New Orleans, and by the time they got a touchdown, it was already 33-3 in the fourth quarter. Backups were already in. Um, and yeah, this was just an ugly game for the Saints. They couldn't do anything. Bo Nix went 16-26 for 164 yards. It wasn't the prettiest game for Denver, let's be clear. A lot of field goals. Um, in fact, most of the first half, all the first half, was just field goals, except for a touchdown in the second quarter to make it 13-0. But otherwise, the offense for the Broncos just really couldn't get going. They only had 2 touchdown runs from Javonte Williams. Otherwise, it was you saw why the Broncos have one of the best defenses in this league. Um, Cedric Wilson was the receiving leader for the Saints. 6 receptions, 57 yards, and a touchdown. And Alvin Kamara never could get going either. And Alvin Kamara is great, but he can't be the one. He can't carry an entire offense, and that's huge. Saints did lose the turnover battle 2-1, and yeah, this was Spencer Rattler's second start. He didn't have any interceptions. He was 25 for 35, 172 yards. That's pretty good. Usually, it's just the Broncos' defense is that good. And Broncos edged the time possession battle 33 minutes to 26 minutes. So it was, yeah. And the Broncos got a defensive touchdown off of a fumble. And yeah, it was pretty dominant and well done by the Broncos to get to 4-3 on the year. Saints they just have a ton of questions, man. They have now lost 5 straight and just can't seem to get anything going after that hot 2-0 start where they were just scoring a ton of points. Um, they off, they really miss Derek Carr, and hopefully he can come back and then when the Saints get healthy, they can be a dangerous team. So who knows? But right now it's looking ugly fast, and they need some answers now before the season just completely derails. Um, let's go to the London game, Jacksonville, in New England. Jacksonville, their second straight week in London. This was a game that started weirdly. The Patriots took a 10-0 lead quickly. It looked like, man, Drake May looks good. and all of a sudden the Jags just ripped off. They ripped off 25 straight points, and then the Patriots scored a touchdown to make it look close before the Jags just absolutely punched their ticket for the win with another touchdown in the fourth quarter to seal it. Drake May, and for it only being his second or third start, he looked good. Um, and not great, but it wasn't awful either. 26 to 37, 276 yards, two touchdowns. For him to be a rookie behind the battle line that New England has and not throw a pick, I mean, that's pretty good. Granted, the Jags defense isn't great, but at the same time, um, yeah, it was very promising for the Patriots that they have a quarterback who is showing some promise. I would say the story of this game was the run game. Tank Bigsby had 26 carries for 118 yards and two touchdowns. He absolutely dominated this game. Was an absolute beast. I believe he had one through the air, maybe. Um, and we did also have a punt return touchdown in this game, a 96-yarder. Um, this was just complete domination by the Jags, who dominated time of possession as well. No turnovers in this game. It just Jacksonville just had the great running game that just never relented, and the Patriots just couldn't do anything once Jacksonville got on a roll with it. So Jacksonville gets their second win of the year. New England falls to 1-6. Just while they may have found the answer at quarterback, the Patriots just have a lot of questions elsewhere. There is the huge news that Jerron Mayo called his team soft. That's getting a lot of ire from both Patriots and non-Patriots fans. Um, it's an interesting criticism coming from a coach of a 1-6 team. I mean, I get it. It's kind of this is kind of a motivation tactic. I think in a way by Mayo, considering they have not played well, but I think there are some positives. So I don't think you can totally say they're a soft team, but they definitely are not exactly the Belichick Patriots. But the Belichick Patriots, let's be fair, at the end weren't that great either. So yeah, and a lot of those pieces stayed with Gerard Mayo. So yeah, this is kind of it's a weird team because they have pieces like Christian Gonzalez on defense and Drake May and Ramondre Stevenson. It's just they have a lot of work to do. There's no right answer, I think, at this time. They're firmly in rebuild mode. So this is going to be interesting to see where the Patriots go. Jags kind of relieve the pressure on Doug Peterson for another week um, with a win. Second straight win, I believe it is. Yeah, it is their second straight win. Having no, it's their not their second straight. They've won two of their last three. They lost to the Bears last week in London. That's right. Yeah, they needed this win to kind of give Doug Peterson some breathing room on his job. But the schedule, I don't think. Yeah, the schedule doesn't ease up at all. They have the Packers, the Eagles, the Vikings, and the Lions, the Texans. Dude, that's a gauntlet. Um, if they somehow get out of this with with a win somehow off this gauntlet, I'll be very impressed. But yeah, it looks bad for Jacksonville, even though they did get a much needed win just to boost morale a bit. Um, Another game that looked promising to start, Tennessee and Buffalo. Titans actually looked competent for the majority of the first half. They actually had a 10-0 lead in this game after Nick Westbrook a teenage touchdown in the second quarter. But then the Bills just absolutely took over and scored 34 straight points, starting at the 10:04 mark with an 11-yard run from James Cook to make it 10-7 at the half, and just they never looked back. Amari Cooper scored two touchdowns. No, no, they scored one. He scored one touchdown in his debut as a Bill, and they just looked good. The Bills just turned it on. Josh Allen still has not thrown an interception. Mason Rudolph, he looked pretty decent for the most part in this game. 25 for 40, 215 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Uh, yeah, yeah, he looked good, and the Titans looked like they could move the ball. They just couldn't finish in the red zone or even get field goals out of it, which is rough. Josh Allen went 21 for 33, 323 yards, two picks. Ray Davis had a decent game, 5 carries for 41 yards and a touchdown, so not bad yards per carry average for them. Tony Pollard had a decent day, 16 carries for 61 yards for the Titans. Um, yeah, this got ugly fast in the second half, and Bills they had 100 more total yards. The Titans had 2 turnovers, which absolutely killed them. The Titans did actually own time of possession, and the Titans they had the run game going for the most part. They just couldn't get the passing game going, and they have talent at receiver like DeAndre Hopkins. They have Tyler Boyd. They have Calvin Ridley. They just can't find a way to get it going, and I don't know if that's coaching. I don't know if it's just chemistry with QBs that just can't throw it very well. But yeah, if Mason Rudolph, who's saved Pittsburgh many a time in his career from bad seasons, can't save you, it's kind of looking bad for the Titans. They're 1-5. Bills are 5-2. Bills definitely looking like one of the top teams in the AFC at this point. Yeah, it was a rough way to end the game, and the Titans have a lot of questions coming out of this game, more than answers. Another team that has a lot of questions to ask themselves is the Giants. They got pummeled 28-3. Eagles just really dominated. This was the Saquon Barkley return game after signing with the Eagles in the offseason. He rushed for 176 yards and a touchdown, and he looked good. And A.J. Brown looked good. The Eagles' offense just looks good again, finally, after a very sluggish start to the year. Jalen Hurts only had to pass 14 times because Saquon Barkley carried the rest of it with 17 carries. It was just that dominant performance from the Eagles, who had 339 yards of total offense to 119 for the Giants. No turnovers in this game, but it definitely showed because the Eagles dominate time of possession as well. And when you dominate time of possession and you dominate the ground game, you're probably going to win. And plus, the Eagles' defense is also getting healthy. So this was a huge win for the Eagles. Giants are just coming off some debilitating losses last week to the Bengals, and this week just absolute pummeling. Last week felt like a game they should have probably won against the Bengals, and now this game was just kind of showing who they are really against the good teams. And the Eagles are looking like a good team again, though even there's still a lot of questions in terms of their coaching. Nick Sirianni is still very much in doubt because there's been some weird play calling, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens now. In terms of who's going to step up in the Eagles locker room. Are they going to keep this momentum up? Because now they've had 2 straight games where they've looked pretty good. They, they did had one game of looking pretty good. The game before they roughed it out against the Browns, but but they still got the win. It's going to be interesting now going into a game against the Bengals, who really need a win to get back to 500, 3-4. If the Eagles can pull this win out against the Bengals, they probably also have kneecapped the Bengals a little bit of their season, but also it might show that they are kind of back as well. Giants just need something to hang on to, and it doesn't look like they have much to hang on to, especially considering they go to Pittsburgh next week and then host the Commanders for a somewhat decent game against the Panthers in Munich. So it's not looking good for the Giants, and dare I say, Brian Dable on the hot seat. He hasn't looked good since his first year in New York when they got to the playoffs and beat the Vikings in the wild card round. So that should be, it's going to be interesting times in both Philly and in New York. A couple other games quickly to go over. Seahawks really brought it to the Falcons this week in Atlanta. Geno Smith looked good. The Seahawks defense looked great. They picked Kirk Cousins off twice, made him look human for the first time in a few games. Um, and yeah, Geno Smith looked great. 18 of 28, 270 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kirk had a great game in terms of yards. He just had 2 picks, and that really just doomed them. The Seahawks defense was all over the Falcons. The Falcons had 3 turnovers. Um, Overall, this was just a really good game for the Seahawks. They won 34-14. Never felt close. Um, the only minus for this game, DK Metcalf went off with a knee injury, though there's optimism that he will probably play again, probably next week. So the Seahawks get a huge, huge relief from that. Um, and they bounced back after having lost three straight. They needed this win. They really did to come back and uh, actually, because of results, I believe the Seahawks are in first place in the division because of everything that happened this week. Yeah, they are in first place in the division at 4-3, which is crazy to think considering the teams that are in that division, like the Niners, um, and the Rams, who came into this year optimistic. But yeah, this was a good game for the Seahawks to get right, and now they have to build on that momentum. Falcons kind of need to look introspect at themselves. They have to go to Tampa, a team they just beat a few weeks ago. A huge game in terms of the division, as both are 4-3. We'll get to the Bucks in a minute, but yeah, this was not a pretty game for Atlanta. The defense didn't show up this week. They need to show up next week if they want to keep up this magical season with Kirk. And the Seahawks, they just need to keep rolling. They need to keep trucking. They've got the Bills next week, which will be a huge litmus test for them. They already failed the first one with the Lions, but if they can, and the Niners as well, but if they can beat the Bills, that might be a launching point in terms of momentum for them. So we'll have to see where that goes. Another one, the Bengals did pull out the win against the Browns. This was a lot uglier than you would have thought. Um, it was 7-6 Bengals. This would have been probably a lead for the Browns if they had made extra points and field goals. The Browns missed a field goal and an extra point on the touchdown. Bad news for the Browns. They did lose Deshaun Watson to an Achilles injury in the first half on the touchdown drive to end the first half. Bengals just took over from there because the backup quarterback was in. And yeah, this was a win for the Bengals, but it didn't feel like a convincing win. The offense looked bad for a second straight week. Um, Chase Brown did kind of pick it up at the end, 15 carries for 44 yards. The defense has looked good again for the Bengals, but how much of that is Dorian Thompson Robinson coming into the game and just having to shut down a rookie quarterback who's just not looked good the last year and a half he's been in the league, um, is very that's a huge question because it kind of looked like the Browns were gaining momentum near the end of the first half until Watson went down, and then from there it just kind of took off for the Bengals. So yeah, they won 21-14. The Browns did score a late touchdown with like a minute and a half left, but it just wasn't enough. So yeah, this was probably the end of the season for the Browns. Now they're 1-6. No Deshaun Watson, and this might actually be we talked about, I think, last week how they really want to get out from under this Deshaun Watson contract. This could be the end of it for him and Cleveland because I don't think Cleveland wants him around anymore. They want to move on. He has such a bulky contract that they can't really do anything about signing other players to help him. So, if I would not be shocked if next year he is cut or traded somewhere, specifically traded because of the whole dead cap thing, because he has such a huge dead cap hit if he is cut. So I would not be shocked if he's traded, and this is the end of the line for him. It might be the end of the line of his career. Sadly, he is a he's a horrible person, but you never like seeing people injured, and yeah, it just sucks that he got hurt. Burrow didn't have a bad game for the Bengals, 15-25 for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. It just never felt like the offense really clicked, and they got fortunate because um they just took advantage of some poor field position that the Browns gave them because they were desperate to kind of get the offense going, and they never could. So my thing is I want to see them against a real team again. They've kind of squeaked by some ugly games with the Browns and the Giants now after having lost to the Ravens in overtime. So now they get a real test with the Eagles before they head home to face the Raiders. Well, they head home to face the Eagles and Raiders before going on the road to face Baltimore again. So two of their next three games could really determine their season. Um, if they lose both, I think the season is over for the Bengals. They would be 4-6, 3-7 or 4-6. Um, if if somehow they lose all three, their season is definitely over. But if they lose two of three, that could be near the end. They really needed this win, of course, to stay alive in general. But yeah, this is going to be it's a tough road because the Bengals just dug themselves such a big hole. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep that up. If they can't, the season's probably going to be over in the next 3 or 4 weeks. Now we get to the good games. The Lions Vikings game was so fun. It was a great back and forth game. The Vikings took a 10-0 lead, and the Lions just came back and ripped off 21 straight points before the Vikings scored a touchdown to cut it back to a 4-point deficit before the Lions scored another one. And then the Vikings just decided to come on and make it a game again. They made it 28-20 in the fourth and 28-23. And then the Lions, they were, struggling on offense, looking for answers, and it looked like they might be starting to. And then the Vikings forced a fumble on David Montgomery, and they score it off the scoop and score to make it 29-28. The Lions just did what they do normally and drive down the field methodically and kick the game-winning field goal with 15 seconds to go. The Vikings just couldn't do anything about it. Jared Goff, he is still him. He only had 3 incompletions all the entire game, 22 of 25, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns. Great stat line for him. Sam Darnold didn't do bad himself either. He just had the one pick. He was 22 for 27, 259 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Um, to me, this was just a game that showed these two teams might be. It felt like a playoff game. It really did. The Vikings have nothing to hang their head on. They fought, they competed in this game. It looked like they might get blown out for a bit. But then when they came back, they showed they were not just the old Vikings who fold up and just crumble like they did with Cousins a lot. They showed they have some gut. They have some grit to them with this squad with Sam Darnold. They have a great defense in general. The defense didn't look great in the second half, but they showed up when they needed to, and just unfortunately on that last drive they didn't. And yeah, it was a gut wrenching loss for the Vikings, but they have nothing to hang their heads on. The Lions definitely do look the class of the NFC so far at 5-1, but the Vikings are not far off from that either. They showed they can compete with the best. They've already beaten the Packers and the Texans this year. So it's not like they can't be good teams. It wasn't their day, and both teams had a turnover. They were both even time of possession and both in total yards. So this isn't a game where you can say, "Oh, the Vikings are frauds." No, I think it just shows it wasn't their day. And on another day, they might beat the Lions. They're just not today, and the Lions are just that good. It will be interesting now that they go to LA to face the Rams on Thursday night. A quick turnaround for them. If they can win that game, they have a launching point because they have very winnable games coming up. It's the Rams, the Colts, the Jaguars, and the Titans. So those are some games they could easily accumulate wins and keep pace with the Lions in terms of wins in the division. Um, so that will be very interesting to see what happens there. The Lions, yeah, they're good. Not much to say. They have a great running game. David Montgomery did come out of this game briefly with what looked like a nasty knee injury. He did come back. Like I said, he had the fumble that gave the Vikings the lead again. But yeah, the Lions now just have to keep trucking on. They have the Titans, and then they get the Packers coming up, and the Texans. So those would be some interesting tests for them to come up on. We did learn also that Jameson Williams, their their great new receiver, who's a second year player, he got suspended for 2 games for PD violation. So that'll be huge. He will miss the Packers game. So that could be interesting development in terms of their offense. Now they've lost Hutchinson on defense and Williams on offense. The Lions defense has stepped up when it needed to without Hutchinson, but also it did definitely show some cracks, and that there are things to be taken advantage of in terms of the run game. So there are some weaknesses that the Lions need to clean up on defense, for sure. The Vikings did expose some things, I think, but the Lions still took advantage of it, and they are a win is a win, and they got it, and they are now top of the division because of that. Another good game that wasn't nearly as talked about as it probably should have been. The Packers hosted the Texans, and this was a really good game. Texans, they went out to a 19-14 lead at the end of the first half. They both just traded blows with each other for a while, and then the Packers did take the lead in the third quarter. The only score of the third quarter was a touchdown to Josh Jacobs, his first touchdown reception of his career, I believe, or as a Packer, I should say. And then the Texans did take a lead with a minute 44 to go at 22-21, and then Jordan Love gets a great clutch drive and sets up the game winner for the field goal that Brandon McManus, the kicker they had just signed last week, he gets the game winner and puts the Packers at 5-2. So this was a huge win for the Packers. We've talked about how the Packers defense is opportunistic. They were great this week. They held C.J. Stroud to the lowest yards of his career, only 86 yards passing, and Joe Mixon carried the offense for the Texans. To be honest, 115 yards on 25 carries for 2 touchdowns. Jordan Love didn't exactly have a great week in terms of the stats. 24-33, 220 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. He definitely has been throwing a lot of interceptions, but he still, like I said, he clutched up when he needed to. Packers had better total yards. They did have 3 turnovers in this game and still won this, which is crazy. Um, you would think 9 times out of 10, if the Packers have 3 turnovers, the Texans probably win 9 times out of 10, but they don't. And yeah, this was a game the Texans probably feel like they should have won, and they didn't. And I don't know. This could be a blueprint really for how the Packers defended C.J. Stroud. Could be a blueprint for teams going forward to see. It'll be interesting to see how teams game plan now the Texans offense because of this. They were kind of an unstoppable unit last year, and now teams have kind of slowed them down this year. It's going to be interesting because the good quarterbacks always, they always step up despite the struggles they have in their year 2. Um, and I think Stroud's gonna be fine. Don't get me wrong. That was a weird game for him, but they still competed. It wasn't a bad game at all for the Texans. He did throw any picks, but still, you kind of want um you kind of wanted that result for them in terms of you know they wanted the win, but they're still because of the division they're in. They still got a pretty healthy lead on that division by a good. They still have the lead on the division by a game actually over the Colts. Um, so this was they wanted to win to keep themselves further ahead than they were in the division, but still it's not a bad loss here considering the team they're playing, the Packers, who are a pretty good team, and now that NFC North looks really good. Um, all the teams are have at most 2 losses in that division, so it's pretty good. The Bears didn't play this week; they were on a bye because of the London game, I believe. So yeah, this was a this is a division that could be pretty good heading down the stretch. Um, the NFC North, so definitely something to keep an eye on there. Late games, the Colts and Dolphins had an ugly game. Um, Snoop Huntley was hurt in this game. Um, they took a 10-0 lead. The Dolphins did, but then they just couldn't do anything else offensively, especially after Huntley went out with an injury and Mark Boyle came in. The Dolphins had more offensive yards, and it wasn't a pretty game either way. Um, it was a very defensive-minded game, and one you could tell the Dolphins really wanted to win, but they just couldn't. They couldn't do anything. Johnny Smith, the tight end, was the leading receiver for the Dolphins. 7 catches, 96 yards, and a touchdown. Um, Snoop Huntley, he only had 13 pass attempts for 87 of 13 for 87 yards and a touchdown. They couldn't get anything going on the running game either. 15 carries, 77 yards. Colts couldn't get anything much done either. Um, Most of their scores were field goals, besides a Tyler Goodson touchdown run in the third quarter, to make it 10 all. Before the Colts just scored some field goals to keep the lead. It was a very ugly game. Did the Colts deserve it? I mean, I guess, but it was a win is a win type game. Colts definitely needed it to keep pace with the Texans, who are now, and they're only one game back of the Texans. Let's be fair, but Richardson hasn't exactly impressed since coming back from injury. Um, it'll be interesting to see if they can improve with Taylor back. Taylor, I do not. Yeah, Jonathan Taylor didn't play this game for the Colts, so that definitely is a factor. But yeah, the Dolphins had more offensive yards, but they did have more turnovers. I believe a pair of fumbles. It was a pair of fumbles, and yeah, it was just weird, weird game. But the Colts come out victorious, and that, a win is a win, and you move on. Um, Another game, late game, that was kind of unforgettable. Commanders won 40-7 over the Panthers. Jay Daniels did come out of this game with a rib injury, but it is reported that he will probably play next week, and it's not that serious. Um, he is, yeah. Marcus Mariota had a great game. 18 of 23, 205 yards, 2 touchdowns, 12 carries for 71 yards and a touchdown for Brian Robinson. Yeah, this was a game the Commanders just dominated from start to finish. Never was close. Andy Dalton was not great. He had 11 of 16 passes, 93 yards and 2 picks. Um, and the Panthers fall to 1-6. They're one of the worst teams in this league. And they showed that. The Commanders definitely, they're showing they have a lot of depth in this team. And it's really cool to see. Yeah, they also showed that depth with Ben Sinnott getting a touchdown, his first of his career, his first catch of the year, I believe it was too. Um, he's a backup to Zach Ertz, who also had a touchdown catch in this game. Yeah, it was just a very, very efficient game for the Commanders, who look very legit this year and maybe could win that division, considering the other teams that are in that division, besides the Eagles, are not that great. You got the Eagles as the only other two lost teams. Dallas and New York do not look great this year so far. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that division shapes out. But Commanders definitely looking like a threat in the NFC, which is kind of wide open this year, weirdly enough, besides the Lions. So yeah, moving on, Rams and Raiders. This was a game that was kind of meh. Rams forced 4 turnovers in this game. That's kind of the story of it, really. Um, Aiden O'Connell left this game injured, broke his thumb, it is believed, so he had surgery. It's not believed to be season-ending, but it definitely doesn't help. And yeah, basically, Matt Stafford didn't have a great game. He had 14 of 23, 154 yards and a pick. Gardner Minshew didn't have a great game either. He had 3 picks off of 15 of 34 passing, 154 yards. So that's just, it was just ugly. Really, both teams just couldn't get a ton of offense going. Um, Once there was a defensive touchdown by the Rams to make it 14-3, and they just really just held off the Raiders. It was 20-6 in the third quarter, 29 by the end of the third quarter. So yeah, it just kind of shows the Rams just hung on, basically after scoring some points to get themselves out of the Raiders' reach, and then just held on. And really, that's all you need to do against the Raiders this year. Really, the Raiders came to this year very, we're going to take over the division or whatever, and they just haven't shown they're great this year. They fall to 2-5. Rams go to 2-4. Raiders actually did outgain the Rams in terms of total yards, 317 to 259. But like I said, turnovers are the story of this game. And when you have 4 turnovers, that is definitely going to help you lose games. So yeah, Raiders just have a lot of questions on that end. I don't think this shows anything great about the Rams themselves. It just shows that they are better than one of the ickier teams in the league, the Raiders. But they needed this win to kind of just help sort their confidence out before they have a stretch of games in the Vikings and Seahawks. So that should be interesting to see if they can build momentum off of this. Great, but I don't see it, and it's just going to be, yeah, it's not a win that you can take much from except the Rams won. And the last afternoon game of the week was Chiefs Niners. Chiefs, they came into this game with a lot of injuries. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster in this game to a hamstring injury. I think he's already been ruled out against the Raiders next week. But they took a 14-3 lead. The Niners did come back and make it a game at 14-12 in the third, but the defense for the Chiefs is just that good. They did lose quarterback Jalen Watson to a injury, and it's believed that his season is over until the playoffs. The Chiefs make it. Um, but yeah, the Chiefs did just enough on offense and did plenty good on defense as they forced 3 picks from Brock Purdy. Um, Neither quarterback statistically had great games. Mahomes had 154 yards, 2 picks. Well, Brock Purdy had 212 yards and 3 picks. But I would say a lot of the stats are kind of showing Chiefs have a better offense this year than they did last year. Mahomes is not statistically having a great year, but a lot of the tape is showing that he has had a better year than what the stats would suggest. And he's still the best quarterback on the planet. Noah Gray was great this game for receptions for 66 yards. George Kittle, of course, was great with 6 receptions for 92. And yeah, the Chiefs win 28-18. The Niners fall to 3-4 on the year. And the Chiefs remain the lone unbeaten team after this week at 6-0. You could say, oh, the Chiefs don't look great, and they haven't looked like, defending champs probably would, back to back. And definitely, it's not the prettiest football in the world, but it definitely shows they can find different ways to win. I believe the offense is looking better and better as the weeks go on. They are gaining more and more yards and are getting better in the red zone. Today in this one they were 3 or 4 in the red zone. Or no, they scored on all their trips to the red zone, I believe it was. They had 329 yards in this game, and yeah, they dominated time of possession. I believe the Chiefs have become a run first team now instead of a pass first, and I think Mahomes is okay with that. Um, Even he got in on the running action with his longest run of the season at 33 yards. And yeah, this is a team that's become a run first team instead of a pass first team like it was when Mahomes came into the league. And I think that's weirding people out a bit too. And yeah, it does feel weird, but at the same time, I think it's a good formula for the Chiefs. Kareem Hunt has been a revelation at running back for the Chiefs, and he's been playing very well. So overall, this was an ugly win, but they did lead pretty much almost wire to wire after they went down 3-0. Um, in the second quarter, they took over and just never looked back. And yeah, they looked like the champs. And if they keep winning like this, I mean, it's not going to look pretty, but it's definitely going to make a lot of people mad. And yeah, they're still the best team until proven otherwise. So moving on to the Sunday night game, Steelers and Jets. This was the debut for Devontae Adams. The Jets just did not look right at all this game, and Russell Wilson did. This is his first start of the year. He threw for 2 touchdowns, ran for another, and the Steelers just looked like the better team overall. 37-15 final score. Russell Wilson, he came out of this game 16-29, 264 yards, 2 touchdowns. Najee Harris had a rushing touchdown, and like I said, Russell Wilson also had a rushing touchdown. Aaron Rodgers came out of this game 24 of 39, 276 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks. Definitely showing again he's kind of not played that great this year. And he tried to get the ball a lot to Devontae. But guess who the league receiver was for the Jets? Brees Hall, the running back, 6 receptions for 103 yards. That says something, really. Um, yes, I know the Jets are a run-first team, and I think that's huge. They did have a lot of yards. They just couldn't convert it into points. And I think they only had the they had the couple of touchdowns early in the game that made it competitive when they went up 15-6. But then after that, the Steelers just ripped off. Um, they ripped off 31 straight points, and that just absolutely demoralized the Jets. And the Steelers just showed why they're a good team. They play great defense. They play complementary football. Steeler football, really, it is. To be quite precise, and it showed. They ran the ball efficiently. Russell Wilson showed he actually might be good for this offense because he gives them a passing dimension, actually. Now, I want to see that consistently. I'm not going to. There's a lot of talk already that he's the better quarterback than Justin Fields. He has some time to prove it. He has the Giants, he has the Commanders, and the Ravens coming up. Those are going to be some huge games, especially the Commanders and Ravens back to back. One might be for the division lead at the midway point, so that will be fascinating to see. Jets just have a lot of questions in terms of what is the offensive structure. You know, is Devontae going to be good for them? It didn't look like it this game, and that might be a little bit of rust, but it definitely hasn't been a good year for the Jets. A year that they thought they could contend for playoffs. They've just kind of melted down into nothing, and it's kind of sad, honestly. Um, then we get to the Monday night games. Ravens Bucks. Um, Ravens decide to sleepwalk through the first quarter, and then just come out and rip off a good 34 points to just build up a lead. And then the Bucks, kind of made a flurry of points in the fourth quarter, and the Ravens just hung on after that. But there were a lot of injuries in this game. Marlon Humphrey went out with a injury. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both left with what are season-ending injuries. It looks like. Chris Godwin had a dislocated ankle. He's out for the year. Mike Evans has a hamstring injury. It is believed he is done for the year. So the Bucks offense is really I hate to make the pun, but they're kind of hamstrung. And they came to this game looking like a good team, and they come out of this game looking like they have a lot of questions on defense, especially the run defense, because Derrick Henry, my heavens, he broke off some yards. He had 15 carries for 169 yards. He had some big runs that never ended in touchdowns, but Lamar Jackson also went off for 5 touchdowns passing, and Baker Mayfield had it's become a usual stat, 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. So he's kind of having a Jameis Winston arc a little bit. And no means does this mean Baker's a bad quarterback. Like, he's still pretty good. Like, he's only got, I think, looking at his stats, he's got 7 picks, but that's not bad. And he leads the league in touchdown passes with 18. So, like, he hasn't been awful. But the Ravens definitely showed some flaws in the Buccaneers' offense. Especially, and that all of that might definitely be because they lost Mike Evans, who is such a huge part of the play action game. He's your deep threat, the number one receiver. When you lose that kind of a threat, yeah, that's going to hamstring any offense. So I need to stop using that pun. Um, it's really going to handicap that offense. But yeah, this showed the Ravens are really good. They scored 41 points in this game and looked really good doing it. And I thought this would be a tight competitive game. It wasn't, and you know I feel silly about it, but at the same time, like, you never know coming in. That's why they play the game. And the Ravens just looked the better team overall, and kudos to them. Lamar Jackson's looking like the MVP, and he is again. He's the reigning MVP, and he looks like it. if he keeps this up, he might be MVP again. But I'm sure Jared Goff is going to have a lot to say about that as well. The last game of the week, Chargers Cardinals. This was the game of Monday night. To be honest, even if it was kind of an ugly game, it was still a much more competitive game. I'm not saying Ravens Bucks wasn't, but it got out of hand pretty quickly in the third quarter. And this was just a game that the Chargers needed to win. They came into this game 3-2 off of a weird. Yeah, they came off this game with a weird win over the Broncos. It looked like they're finally finding their footing again. Um, but then at the same time, the Cardinals just were scrappy in this game. Like they just hung around. And the Chargers, story of this game really, they kicked 5 field goals and never scored a touchdown. And the Cardinals did. They scored 2. And ultimately that was the difference because the Chargers just needed field goals, could do field goals, and the Cardinals, once they got the lead at 14-9 in the fourth quarter, really just kind of held on until the Chargers made another field goal to take the lead at 15-14. And then Kyler had a clutch drive to go win the game at 17:50. There was a huge call on the Chargers' final drive where they got the field goal to take the lead. That could have been pass interference, but it was ruled uncatchable, and I kind of agree with the call. Um, Kyler, the stats don't really show it, but he played great. He was 14 of 26, 145 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. I Kyler's just been playing kind of scrappily, quiet, good football this year, and it's kind of impressive. And James Conner's also been pretty quietly impressive. 19 carries for 101 yards. He was also the lead receiver at 2 receptions for 51. Um, yeah, this is a scrappy Cardinals team that realized they didn't get a ton of pressure, but when they did, they harassed Justin Herbert enough, and he looked skittish in the pocket. He didn't know who was coming, what wasn't, and this was just a game that the Chargers got out-chargered. They want to be the team that dominates you on the ground and stifles you on defense. The Chargers are one of the better scoring defenses in the league, and it shows. Like they made the Cardinals' life hard, but still the Cardinals could drive on them and score. This is kind of the Chargers of normal, and the Chargers just can't seem to finish games. It seems a little bit, and Justin Herbert, he's got to feel frustrated because against teams, their losses this year, they just can't find a way to finish them, and they get outcharged most of the time, and it's just really rough. And they're now 3-3. There's a lot of questions about them. Offensively, the defense is pretty sound still. Like you got to give credit to them in terms of the coaching on defense. Like they're still pretty good there. The offense just has a lot of questions because outside of J.K. Dobbins, Will Dissly was their offense yesterday. J.K. Dobbins had 14 carries for 40 yards. And so they turned to Will Dissly, who had 8 receptions for 81 yards, and he was their offense. And Josh Palmer, he tried late. They tried to late make him get into the game plan, but it's just too little, too late. And yeah, it's very apparent the Chargers have no receiver help, and I don't know if they're going to go for it at the trade deadline or not. But they're still in the playoff picture, but they definitely need to improve on the offensive side if they want to, make any noise in the playoffs. And the Cardinals, they're not probably going to do anything this year, but they've got the pieces, man. They've got some good pieces on defense. On offense, they definitely have an identity that Jonathan Gannon wants them to have. And this is going to be a Cardinals team, I think, that could be competitive in the next couple of years if Kyler could keep playing like he is this year. So yeah, good win for the Cardinals. They go to 3-4. They're actually on second place in that division, weirdly enough, because of their win over the Niners. So we'll see how long that lasts. Probably not very long, but still, it's very interesting to see how plucky the Cardinals have been this year. And that's going to be it in terms of our grid side recap for the week. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please check us out on all platforms. We are on Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Apple Music, and YouTube. If you could give us a like, a follow, a share, subscribe, all the good things. Leave a comment and a review. That also helps, as it helps us expand our reach, as we want to grow and help others also join this community. And with that, hope you have a good rest of your week. We will see you on the preview episode.